Hello, and welcome to Scott's Odyssey. In a quiet little former coal mining, lumber, and fire brick manufacturing town located about 10 miles southeast of Johnstown, Pennsylvania, we find a location where one man has preserved a piece of our history and who we once were. This is the resting place of more than 50 electric trolleys from 2 countries and over 9 cities. Welcome to the Vintage Electric Streetcar Company, more commonly referred to as the Windber Trolley Graveyard. See you in a minute.
Welcome back. If you've watched my videos before, thank you for your patronage, and if you're new to Scott's Odyssey, welcome aboard. Here we are exactly 4 years later from when I originally was going to shoot this site. It would have been my 30th video, where I was still working out the kinks in how to present the sites and information in a collective way to put it all together in a nice package. But it's not what the security person nor the local law enforcement thought was okay. So the video never happened. And now, well, we'll get into the now just shortly. Special thanks goes out to Crumbling Decay America, a longtime friend of mine since I've started the channel, who provided me with some extremely needed footage for this video. Today we find ourselves at Vesco, the Vintage Electric Streetcar Company, or more commonly referred to as the Windber Trolley Graveyard. The purpose of this graveyard is to act as a reclamation site of no longer used electric trolleys, in which parts are sold to groups whom are performing repairs on active lines like the MBTA in Boston and historic restoration locations such as the Rock Hill Trolley Museum, which is Pennsylvania's first operating trolley museum, and I'll put a link down below for the video that I did with them. The owner of the property was Edward G. Metka, originally from Chicago, an obsessive fan of these electric trolleys. It would make sense, being that he grew up in the 1940s seeing these everywhere with the introduction of the President's Conference Committee car, or more commonly called the PCC streetcar. With the rise in automobiles in the United States, city buses were much more economical and less infrastructure dependent, which in turn brought an end to trolley streetcars in 90% of North America by the mid-1960s. Because of the need for mass public transportation and the original high cost to implement, a handful of larger cities continued to employ the use of their trolleys. These cities officially became called the holdovers, and these forms of transportation became named vintage trolley systems, which was really great for tourism. In the 1980s, Philadelphia went through its first scrapping of trolley lines. Ed Metka purchased 10 streetcars at $500 each in scrap, with the intent of reselling their parts or fully restored cars to cities that continued to use their PCC lines. While growing up in Philadelphia, we saw trolleys everywhere with their little antenna for the pantograph systems on their roofs sparking at every junction. The pantograph system is a device on the roof of the car that obtained power from an overhead hot power line with a little antenna that was made of an arm and a slide plate that glided along the wire. I distinctly remember how I always thought it was so neat to watch this steampunk-style bus kicking off sparks and hearing the clap of electricity arcing as it hit a connector or an interchange, and then the air around you would be permeated with the smell of ozone, a very specific smell that you only found in cities with electric trolleys, or similarly, the smell of ozone and petrichor right before a big thunderstorm would roll through during the summer months. This site has electric streetcars from Chicago, Philadelphia, Boston, Kansas City, Grand Rapids, Johnstown, Pittsburgh, Cleveland, and even Toronto, Canada. And because of the drastic increase of the number of scrap trolley cars Ed Metka had accumulated, he needed a new home for his entire fleet of vintage trolleys. As is with the larger part of central Pennsylvania, Windber's location of abandoned and forgotten industrial infrastructure provided Ed Metka with a 21-acre site, a building specific for the manufacture and repair of coal cars, and a mile of Pennsylvania gauge trolley track. The site was formerly the Berwyn White coal mining company coal car manufacturing facility. Then it became home to the trolley graveyard. Mind you, not all of these trolleys are streetcars. While researching the history of this site, I saw many people erroneously call the Philadelphia trolleys of the Market-Frankford line streetcars. And this is not only wrong, but these trolleys only ever saw streets from 90 feet in the air on an overpass trestle or from 90 feet underground in a tunnel. In Chicago and Pennsylvania, there are special types of elevated train cars referred to as the Chicago L and the Philadelphia L. These are connected electric cars for mass transit systems on a 5-foot 2 1/4 gauge or broad gauge line. As a result, you will see it called the Pennsylvania trolley gauge, and the cars may be called a trolley bus. But in reality, they are a train system because trolley services are only street-based. The reason for this odd gauge of trolley is because these transportation cars actually used the pre-existing railroad lines. A little side note, Philadelphia is the only city in the world that has an active elevated train system, a subway system, and a trolley system. Out of about 1,000 streetcar trolley systems that existed in the United States, only 7 remain active, and for most of them, their days are numbered. You can see that some of these cars at this site have already been dismantled. Their used parts were shipped out for trolleys in Aruba, San Francisco, Kenosha, Wisconsin, and even Dubai. In the 1990s, Ed Metka was able to obtain 5 cars from the Toronto Transit Commission in Canada and flipped them to Kenosha, Wisconsin for a tourist loop that travels through their historic districts. As of 2018, there are several locations in the United States reviving some of the older streetcar trolley services, such as El Paso and Boston. But for the most part, these vintage electric streetcars have seen their day. That leaves only the historical museums who can use these cars, which unfortunately turn this dream of a historic revival of vintage electric trolley cars into a true graveyard. And that was the story of 2020 when I finished my investigation and before I made this video. As of November 23rd in 2023, the site began to disappear into history. Windber's local government was getting a little upset about the number of illegal trespass onto the site and publicly stated that this site was a blighted area. Ed Metka finally sold off the majority of the site to a scrap company and kept a few of his prized cars to take with him back to Indiana, where he will finally retire with his family at the age of 86. And thus ends another story, only captured in photos and in the history of who we once were. Let me know in the comments below if you know of stories and locations such as the Windber Trolley graveyard. My research is limited only by the information that people do not share openly. Help me break that barrier, and let's share the history and culture of who we once were. As always, I thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.
Mm-hmm.